Okay, here's a brief video following up on the earlier one on making an index. Um, so if you recall from that, we're working with some variables that represent people's uh, kind of arousal or the intensity of the kind of emotional experience and their rafting trip. And we split that variable into two summaries. One, which counted how many of the times out of 10 that they could have assessed the kind of arousal level being just right in the middle. And then the other one just created a score that the higher the value, the higher the arousal level. So we had to reverse code 3 items that, let's see, they were the conservative, boring, and feel safe items. Those ones were recoded. And so after making those variables, I was curious about how they related to the key dependent variable in this study, which is people's satisfaction. So basically, how much did this sort of arousal level influence how satisfied people were with their rafting experience, and how much did the sort of exactly meeting their desired level of arousal influence their satisfaction. And there's a number of ways that we operationalize satisfaction. One of them is we did a recode where we just made it a binary indicator that was a 1 if they were dissatisfied. So if their satisfaction level on the kind of composite score was a 3 or less. And then we have another variable called met desire, which was just a single item that was like, to what degree did this trip meet your desires for what you wanted. And then we have 3 indices that are based on their satisfaction as related to the skills of the guide, the safety, and the interpretation that the guide did during the trip. And then let's see, oh yeah, and then there's one for personality, a 4th one. And then this other one was looking at positive purchase, which is, did they tip or did they buy a CD, or did they, get any knickknacks or trinkets or that sort of thing. And then here at the bottom of this list we have the 3 arousal related items. The one that Stephen made initially, which ends up being almost identical to the index that just summed them up. And then the Oh, I'm sorry. The EEL3 sum is the one that I created, which was whether it was a 3 or not, and then the ELRC is the one that Stephen made, and then the arousal sum is the one that I made that just summed them up, and then the one that he made and this last one end up being about the same. And we can see that actually if we run this, and so we take these 3 alternative measures of arousal and we copy that, and then paste it in here. Oops. I think I failed to copy it. Copy. Paste. There we go. And then we've bound those together. So that means that we can run a correlation on this thing called arousal alts. I think I have that in here. No, I didn't. I must have typed it directly in. So I'll just type it right here. So we'll put core and then arousal alts, alternative versions of the arousal indicator, and can copy that, paste it in here, and we will get a nice little correlation matrix. And so what this shows is that EL3 sum is perfectly correlated with itself. So the main diagonal here is 1s. That's not exactly surprising. And then the EL3 sum, which is whether they scored it as a 3 or not, is positively correlated with the ELRC index and with the arousal sum, which makes sense, right? Because the 3 is related to the 3s. That is not that surprising. However, it wouldn't be perfectly correlated because there's going to be variation for all those things that were recoded into a 0 that had been some value other than a 3. They're varying, and they're therefore not perfectly related. But what we do see is actually the ELRC index here and the arousal sum are almost identical. So you wouldn't want to put both of those into a regression equation because basically they're the same thing. So we would probably just choose to use one or the other of those. But the question remains is how much variation in satisfaction and satisfaction related things do these variables related to arousal explain, or how related are they? And we can do that by looking at this right here, the compare arousal variables cbind. So what we're going to do there is we're going to combine these 3 that we just described And in fact, we could, if we want, eliminate one of these. So we could get rid of the ELRC index because we know actually, well, let's leave it in there actually because then we can see how it's related to the other items. It turns out to be basically identical with the arousal sum. So we're going to paste this in here. And then, so nothing happened, but actually something did in the background. So now we run a correlation. This is going to be a bigger correlation matrix because it has like 8 or 9 variables. So it's a little harder to read. So we get all these things. So if we go up here to the top one, the kind of the first column here, what we see is this is the dissatisfaction, right? This is the dummy coded dissatisfaction variable, and we can see that it's perfectly correlated with itself. No big surprise there. And we can see it has a strong negative correlation with whether the trip met someone's desires. Not a surprise there. It's negatively related to these skills, and it makes sense because it's composed from something related to these items, right? So people who are dissatisfied, that they tended to give lower scores on the skills index, safety, interpretation, personality, all that sort of stuff. They tended to be less likely, or to give they're less likely to either give tips or buy things or that sort of thing. It's also, but what we're really curious about is actually how that dissatisfaction is related to whether this perfectly met their desired sort of level of intensity. And we can see that it's negative related to that. It's negative related to this ELRC index, which is just how arousing it was or how intense it was. And then also the arousal sum. Those are all negative. So that's no big surprise. But the kind of more interesting questions is how do these last 3 variables here, these last 3 rows in each of these, how do they relate to the different types of ways that people might be satisfied? Okay, so the Met Desire one, they're almost all the same, which is kind of interesting. The satisfaction with the skills, that's interesting because it's actually more strongly related to the exactly meeting someone's desire than it is the intensity. So that's actually kind of interesting, I think. And then here we have the safety index, and once again, the exactly meeting their desired level of intensity has a stronger correlation than either of these items that are just summing up the intensity. So that's actually kind of very informative. Whereas the interpretation part, the actually reverses that. So it's a stronger relationship between kind of how satisfied they were with the interpretive capacities of the guide in terms of the overall sum of those things rather than exactly meeting their expectations. It's about the same for the personality. They're equal more or less. And then here, this is interesting to me, is that the tips or positive purchase index here, the strongest relationship is to once again, the exactly meeting the arousal level that the person desired, and it's almost at a 0.10 level. So this is actually has some chance to do some unique explaining of this, what is to people in the business world a very important sort of outcome related to satisfaction is then do they go on and spend more money or recommend this to other people, that sort of thing. So anyways, and then this last little corner over here, this is just what we looked at in the other correlation matrix. So anyways, that's one way to kind of look at results of this sort of effort and see how independent variables that you're creating from multiple indicators, and once you've constructed those, you can go and look and see how they're relating to some of your dependent variables as kind of a precursor to doing a more sort of complete analysis with multiple regression or something like that. The end.